On the day of our 7th wedding anniversary, I received a divorce agreement. I called Emily, only to be met with a barrage of scolding. "I'm at work. Do you have nothing better to do than call me? It's just a fake divorce. Why are you making such a fuss?" Through the receiver, I could clearly hear Nathan's laughter and the sound of a child. Then the call abruptly ended. Not long after, Nathan posted an update online. "Thank you, Emily, for agreeing to divorce for me. Now my son can finally live in the best school district." In the past, I would have been furious and gone to confront Emily for an explanation. But this time, I was just tired. In the photo he posted, Nathan and Emily were seated with a little boy between them. Emily was holding a spoon, feeding the child, while Nathan looked at them with a radiant smile. They looked like a picture-perfect family of 3. No, they would soon be a real family of 3. To ensure Nathan's son could attend the city's best elementary school, Emily wanted to stage a divorce with me, then marry Nathan to register the boy under her name. I put down my phone and glanced at the medical report in front of me. Without any expression, I signed the divorce agreement. It wasn't until 2 a.m. that Emily came home, reeking of alcohol. She stumbled through the door and collapsed into my arms, her tone soft and affectionate. "Derek, I drank a little too much. I feel awful." I frowned and pushed her away. The smell of alcohol was nauseating. Emily immediately became irritated, her brows tightening as she spoke with annoyance. "Derek, can you stop being so difficult? I've been working all day. I'm exhausted. When will you learn to understand me?" So she knew I was upset. I replied indifferently, "Exhausted? Of course you are. After work, you had to rush off to care for someone else's child." Emily looked surprised. After all, the old me would never have said something like that. In the past, no matter how big the issue, she only needed to act a little coy, and I would let it slide. I truly put her on a pedestal and adored her. But now, I finally understood that constant accommodation wouldn't earn me equal love. Her eyes turned red, and her voice sounded aggrieved. "Do you really think that? Today was Nathan's son's birthday. That poor boy has been without a mother since he was young. Now that Nathan asked me for help, how could I refuse?" She opened the bag in her hand and pulled out a small slice of cake. "I even brought you some cake. Do you have to be so suspicious and petty, Derek? You're a grown man. Can't you stop obsessing over trivial matters?" The leftover piece of cake sat before me, adorned with a single piece of mango. My mind flashed back to Nathan's post. The table in his photo displayed a 2-tier cake covered with an assortment of fruits. Emily had specifically cut a piece to bring home for me. By all accounts, I should have been touched. But instead, my heart felt cold. I was allergic to mango. Taking out the signed divorce agreement, I handed it to her and said calmly, "I've signed it. When do you want to finalize the divorce?" A flicker of panic crossed Emily's face. She reached out to grab my hand. "Derek, listen to me. It's just a temporary divorce. Once the child is admitted to school, we'll remarry right away." I shook my head, my tone resolute. "There's no need to fake it. Let's make it real. I'm tired too." Something about my words seemed to anger her. Pointing a finger at me, she snapped, "Derek, what have you been so tired about since we got married? I work my ass off every day, and you just stay home cooking and doing laundry. What on earth are you dissatisfied with? Nathan and I have been friends for over 10 years. If there was something between us, do you think you'd even have had the chance to marry me?" When she mentioned Nathan, she couldn't help but curl her lips into a faint smile, but the moment she looked at me, her expression turned angry again. "I only care about his son because I feel sorry for him. You can't even tolerate a child. Do you really have to pick a fight with me over this today?" I stood there stunned, with a million things I wanted to say. Back when she was starting her company, I drank myself into a stomach ulcer to secure her first deal. She would spend hours chatting animatedly with Nathan, completely disregarding my feelings. She gave the only school spot to Nathan's son. What about our future child? But in the end, I swallowed all my words, along with the unspoken grievances. Fine. If we're divorcing, let's do it properly. I don't want to argue about these so-called trivial matters anymore. Emily wanted to respond, but her phone rang, interrupting her. It was Nathan's custom ringtone. On the screen, his contact name flashed, my hero. In contrast, my contact name on her phone was simply Derek, full name included. It had bothered me so much that we once had a 3-day Cold War over it. In the end, I was the one who caved and apologized to make up with her. Emily answered the call almost instantly. Nathan's anxious voice echoed through the quiet room. Emily, Andy is sick. He's crying and saying he wants to see his mom. Can you come over? Without hesitation, Emily headed for the door, but I stopped her. She looked at me, visibly annoyed. Derek, will you ever stop? Are you seriously competing with a child for attention? You're almost 30. Have some empathy. I shook my head and said calmly, you forgot your house key. A flicker of guilt crossed her face. She leaned in to plant a soft kiss on my cheek. Derek, I'll be back soon. Wait for me at home. I watched as her figure disappeared through the doorway, my thoughts spinning. I'm not waiting for you anymore. My packed suitcase sat by the door, but Emily didn't notice it at all. She came and went from the house twice, her mind entirely consumed by Nathan and his son. I sighed, pushed the suitcase out the door, and headed to Lucas's place, my childhood friend. Lucas greeted me with his usual teasing grin. What, another fight with your wife? I handed him a copy of the divorce papers, my tone flat. This time, it's not a fight. It's a divorce. Lucas's face froze as he flipped through the papers. His voice was filled with disbelief. Derek, are you insane? This agreement says you're walking away with nothing. I know. Lucas became visibly upset, defending me indignantly. You worked yourself to the bone helping her start that company, traveled all around to bring in business for her, and now you're just walking away? That's millions in marital assets you're giving up. I forced a bitter smile. The most valuable thing isn't the money or assets. It's the 10 years of love and companionship we shared, 3 years of college, building a business together, and 7 years of marriage. Every memory, every moment we supported each other, those things are priceless, far beyond what any property or shares can compare to. I buried my head in the pillow, a single tear silently soaking into the fabric. It's just some company shares and a house. I don't want any of it. Lucas, you have to believe me. I'll always have the ability to start over from scratch. Lucas stood there stunned. After a long pause, he muttered with a tinge of bitterness, "You're probably right. Still, I just can't help but feel sorry for you. Emily, she's really not worth it." I patted him on the shoulder. Let it be. I've taken a sleeping pill and plan to get some rest. My phone buzzed twice on the nightstand. Squinting, I unlocked the screen to find 3 messages from Nathan. Sorry for troubling Emily so late, but Andy was crying and wanted his mom. I really didn't know what else to do. Please don't let something this small cause a fight between you two. Come over for dinner tomorrow. Let it be my way of apologizing to you on behalf of Emily. You know she's been spoiled since childhood. It's my fault for indulging her. The smug, antagonistic tone of his messages was glaringly obvious. I blocked Nathan on social media, put my phone down, and drifted off into a deep sleep. The next day, I started preparing my resume, intending to apply for some jobs. My phone rang. It was Emily. Her voice was sharp and accusatory. Derek, why are you so petty? Nathan only sent you a message trying to mediate between us, and you actually blocked him? I can't believe how narrow-minded you've become. Instead of wasting time being jealous, why don't you focus on fixing your terrible career? I opened my mouth to respond, but Emily cut me off, her tone imperious. Nathan made dinner and invited the two of us over. Don't embarrass me by refusing. After dinner, we'll go finalize the divorce. We need to transfer Andy's residency in time for school enrollment in September. I hesitated for a moment. Truthfully, I couldn't wait to get the divorce over with. A dinner wouldn't kill me. After a brief pause, I replied, fine. Following the address Emily sent me, I arrived outside Nathan's apartment building. Emily was already waiting, her expression impatient. You're so inconsiderate. When someone invites us to dinner, the least you can do is show up on time. Hurry up. Without even glancing at me, she marched upstairs. As soon as we entered, Emily washed her hands and headed straight to the kitchen. Nathan, let me help you. It was clear that this wasn't her first time here. I could imagine similar scenes playing out during the nights she didn't come home. It wasn't until she stepped into the kitchen that she seemed to remember my presence. Turning back, she casually said, Derek, just sit on the couch for a bit. I sat in silence, watching Nathan smile as he tied an apron around Emily. The two of them worked seamlessly together, laughing and chatting as they cooked. Nathan handled the stove while Emily plated the food, their dynamic resembling that of a loving couple. I lowered my gaze. So this was what it looked like when Emily truly loved someone. It was nothing like our life together. Back then, I would prepare an entire meal before she got home from work. While she ate, I would wash her laundry and listen to her complain about the food. Too salty, shrimp unpeeled, dishes too bland. She knew how to love someone. She just didn't love me. Dinner was tasteless. Nathan and Emily reminisced about their childhood as I silently ate. Occasionally, Emily would affectionately wipe Andy's mouth or coax him to eat more, acting the part of a devoted mother. Yet, just a few years ago, when I asked her about having children, she dismissed the idea, saying she didn't like kids. Turns out, it wasn't that she didn't like kids, she just didn't want to have them with me. A sharp pain twisted in my stomach. Sweating profusely, I clutched my abdomen. As we left, I caught the mocking triumph in Nathan's eyes. The pain in my stomach intensified. Finally, Emily noticed something was wrong. What's the matter? Are you feeling unwell? Let me take you home. I shook my head. Let's go finalize the divorce. Seeing my refusal, Emily scoffed, then drove us to the courthouse. The process was quick. When we walked out with our divorce papers, I felt surprisingly light. Emily seemed to be in a good mood too, her tone uncharacteristically kind. Come on, I'll drive you home. I waved her off. Just go. The pain in my stomach grew worse, like 1,000 needles stabbing me simultaneously. I clutched my stomach and slowly crouched down, trembling all over. Emily saw this and was about to get out of the car to help me, her brows furrowed. What's wrong with you again? Just then, her phone rang. It was Nathan's ringtone. She answered it first. What? Andy has a fever again? Okay, I'll be there right away. Don't give him any medicine yet. I'll feed it to him myself when I get there. Otherwise, he'll cry again. She closed the car door, fastened her seatbelt, and glanced at me. I have something to do, so I won't be coming home. You can take a cab back yourself. Wait. I mustered all my strength to squeeze out a few words. Without even looking back, Emily started the car and drove off. In an instant, it felt as though my body had been swallowed by darkness. Powerless to resist, I passed out. When I opened my eyes again, I was already lying in a hospital bed. Beside me sat a young woman with delicate brows, almond-shaped eyes, and fair skin. She was stunning, but not in a way that demanded protection. Rather, she exuded a calm reliability. Seeing me awake, she smiled and introduced herself. I'm Grace, Lucas' sister. My brother couldn't make it, so he asked me to come instead. Feeling a bit embarrassed, I tried to sit up to thank her. This is really too much trouble for you. Grace quickly pressed me back down, her face full of disapproval. Don't move around. Your stomach ulcer is severe and at risk of perforation. We recommend immediate surgery. It was then that I noticed her white coat. No wonder Lucas had asked her to look after me. She was a doctor. She gently helped me lie back down and adjusted a pillow to make me more comfortable. At that moment, the hospital room door swung open and Emily entered, her face full of displeasure. Derek, you really know how to make a fuss. Isn't there someone taking care of you? Why did you have to call me to come over? Do you know Andy was just crying for his mom? Grace spoke up to explain. I'm a doctor at this hospital. When the patient fainted, the nurses first tried to contact family members. Since no one came, I came to check on him. Only then did Emily notice Grace's appearance, pure and beautiful, like a delicate flower. Watching our intimate interaction, her eyes filled with fury. We're only pretending to be divorced. That doesn't mean you can find someone new. Derek, don't push it too far. I gestured for Grace to leave first. Once she exited the room, I lowered my tone. Emily, I never agreed to any pretend divorce. If you're so eager to play stepmother to Andy, I support you. I'll make room for you and his father. The love I once held for her was gone. Looking at Emily now only filled me with disgust. My stomach started to hurt again, so I closed my eyes and pretended to sleep, issuing a clear dismissal. Go home. After the divorce, let's not see each other again. Emily stood there stunned for a long time, seemingly unable to comprehend my sudden coldness. In the end, she slammed the door and left. I knew she was confident that I would chase after her, but this time I was truly done. I stayed in the hospital for a few days. Unexpectedly, it was Emily who yielded first. She came to visit with a pot of soup she had made. This time, she wasn't arrogant, but instead approached me with careful deference. Derek. I thought about it after I went home. This was my fault, she said softly, lowering her head. She reached out to touch my hand, but withdrew when I avoided her. Her tone grew even meeker. Derek, please don't be angry. Once Andy starts school, let's remarry right away. These past few days, I've been home alone and scared at night. When you're discharged, can you move back in? I miss you so much. After 10 years together, it was the first time I had ever heard Emily speak so humbly. I pulled my hand away and reminded her coldly, we're already divorced. What are you trying to pull now? Her arm froze midair, and a trace of awkwardness flashed across her perfectly made-up face. After a moment, she deliberately ignored my words, picked up her bag, and stood. Derek, remember to drink the soup. I made it myself. It simmered on low heat for 3 hours. I'll head to work now, but I'll come back to see you tomorrow. Exhausted, I closed my eyes. I couldn't understand what had gotten into Emily. In 10 years together, she had never cooked for me once. Now, after everything, she was suddenly trying to make amends, showing up every day with food. I laughed bitterly. Only after losing me did she learn to cherish me. Grace walked in with a cheerful smile. Derek, the surgery is coming up soon. Are you nervous? Over the past few days, Grace had often come to chat with me when she wasn't busy, and we had grown closer. Not at all. With Dr. Grace performing the surgery herself, I'm completely at ease, I replied with a smile. She glanced at the food container on the table and froze. Did you eat? Didn't I tell you to fast for 48 hours before surgery? I gave her a wry smile. Emily keeps saying she wants forgiveness, but she doesn't even know what illness I have. She probably still thinks I'm faking it to get her attention. Don't worry, I didn't eat. I always listen to Dr. Grace. Grace playfully patted me. Good. Get some rest. A nurse will come to wheel you into the operating room soon. After she left, a wave of anxiety crept over me. I had claimed not to be scared, but it was still surgery. To distract myself, I opened my phone and scrolled through social media. 10 minutes ago, Nathan had posted a photo with the caption, 10 years of regret, finally fulfilled today. The picture was of 2 bright red marriage certificates. In the corner, Emily's freshly done nails were visible. The surgery went well, and I stayed in the hospital for a few more days. When Emily called me again, her tone was urgent. Derek, come to the 3rd floor of the hospital. Andy is sick and needs a blood transfusion. I remember you also have Rh-negative blood, don't you? My voice was weak as I spoke. I can't donate blood right now. Emily's tone was furious. Derek, are you even a man? A child's life is at stake, and you can't rise above this? Stop playing the martyr card. I don't have time or the patience to deal with your games. I chuckled bitterly. So, Emily thought I was faking illness to gain her sympathy. Before I could say anything, Emily issued an ultimatum. If I don't see you on the 3rd floor in half an hour, I'll throw that jade pendant of yours out the window. Of course, after spending 10 years with me, she knew exactly what mattered most to me. That jade pendant was my mother's most precious keepsake, something she had brought back for me after climbing a mountain to pray for my safety. Emily had taken a liking to it and often wore it, but now it had become her bargaining chip to threaten me. Summoning all my strength, I struggled to my feet and dragged myself to the 3rd floor, step by agonizing step. Emily pulled me into a chair and forced the nurse to draw 400 cubic centimeters of my blood. She wanted to take more, but the nurse, noticing how pale I had become, firmly removed the needle. Nathan looked disappointed and even made a motion as if to kneel before me. Derek, I know you're upset, but Andy's life depends on you. I'm begging you, just a little more blood. Emily, however, remained cold, mocking me. Your body really is pathetic. Look at you, falling apart after just a little blood loss. You're completely useless in a crisis. Sweat poured down my body, and I felt a dull pain from my surgical wound. At that moment, Grace and Lucas rushed in. Lucas shoved Emily aside and pointed an accusing finger at her. Do you even have a conscience, woman? Derek just had surgery, and now you're forcing him to donate blood. Are you trying to kill him? Emily froze in shock. Surgery? Derek just had surgery? Why didn't anyone tell me? I'm his wife. Lucas, enraged, glared at her with bloodshot eyes. What kind of wife are you? Derek has devoted himself to you for years, helping you run your business, handling clients, drinking himself into a stomach ulcer that required surgery, and what did you do? You ran off and married another man the moment he was hospitalized. And now you're forcing him to donate blood for someone else's child? Do you even realize that losing this 400 cubic centimeters of blood could endanger his life? Emily, you don't deserve to be called human. Get out of here. Emily's face crumbled as she trembled, trying to touch me, but Grace stepped in coldly, keeping her at bay. Grace crouched down to check my wound, her tone icy. This might be your personal business, but as your doctor, I'm responsible for you. For a woman like her, is it really worth risking your life? I had no strength left. As I felt myself sliding off the chair, my vision darkened, and I collapsed into Grace's arms. She's not worth it, I murmured, barely audible. I just want my pendant back. Not worth it. Those 3 words shattered Emily. She burst into tears. I was taken back to my hospital room. Emily followed behind, enduring Lucas's relentless scorn. In my semi-conscious state, I thought I saw her silhouette. Emily, I called out with all the strength I could muster. Her eyes lit up as she rushed to my side, grabbing my hand. Derek, I'm here. Give me back my mother's pendant, I said through clenched teeth, pain searing through my wound. Her face fell, all light draining from her eyes. She looked utterly defeated, tears streaming down her face as she sobbed softly. Lucas, uninterested in her pleas, yanked the pendant from her neck and shoved it into my hand. Tears dripped down Emily's face, making her look pitiful. Just then, Nathan pushed open the door. Seeing Emily in tears, he immediately moved to comfort her, but she shoved him away, her face cold. What are you doing here? Derek nearly lost his life for Andy, and we agreed this was just a fake marriage. There's no need for these affectionate gestures anymore. Nathan's face flickered with surprise, humiliation flashing across his expression before he stormed out of the room. Lying in bed, I watched the drama unfold, finding it darkly amusing. Emily still had the knack for twisting the truth, making others forget the real story. Once I had found this trait of hers to be clever and endearing. Now it only seemed venomous. Grace noticed my dry lips and leaned in close to whisper, "Would you like some water?" I nodded. She brought a cup to my lips, her actions gentle and considerate. The water was perfectly lukewarm, just right. I drank it all in one go and smiled at her. "Thank you, Grace." Emily, standing nearby, immediately turned red-eyed. "Grace? You're calling her Grace?" "Derek, we've been together for 10 years, 10 whole years, and you're calling her Grace? Do you have feelings for her now?" Hearing this, Grace looked embarrassed, her face flushing as she quickly left the room. My expression darkened, and my tone turned harsh. "Emily, you've become unrecognizable. If I had known what you were really like, I would have never been with you in the first place. Now I'm stepping aside to make room for Nathan and his son, so you can play stepmother and get him into the best school in the city. What more could you possibly want? Why must you keep clinging to me? Let me make this clear. Not only do I not love you anymore, but I find you repulsive." Emily broke down, covering her face with her hands. "Derek, please, I know I was wrong. Can't we start over? You know we're meant to be. Over the past 10 years, I gave my heart completely. I just couldn't resist temptation for a moment, but I truly love you. I can't lose you." Her voice grew softer and softer. I kept my tone emotionless, calm as ever. "We're done. I will never go back." Emily's face turned pale, and she looked like she might collapse. I spent half a month in the hospital recovering. During that time, Emily came by every single day, caring, attentive, bringing meals, and making sure I was warm. She acted like a devoted wife who genuinely cared about her husband. But a broken mirror can never be made whole again. No matter how sarcastic or cold I was to her, she would smile and take it all in stride, becoming even more considerate. The night before I was discharged, she caught me joking around with Grace at the door of my hospital room. Grace even playfully lifted my shirt. Emily stormed off in tears, slamming the door behind her. I thought that was the last I'd see of her. But to my surprise, when I was discharged the next day, she was waiting for me downstairs at the hospital. When she saw me, her tone was pitiful. "Derek, we've been married for so many years. Let me drive you home, just this once, please." I shook my head and refused. Emily grabbed my sleeve and gently tugged it. "Derek, just one last time. Let me take you home, and I promise I won't bother you again." After hesitating for a moment, I got in the car. Her persistent pestering had worn me down to the point of exhaustion. On the way, Emily handed me a bottle of water. "Derek, you just had surgery. Drinking more water is good for your recovery." Frowning, I twisted the cap open and took a few sips. The drive wasn't short, and I leaned back in my seat, feeling drowsy. Emily's gaze softened, unusually tender. Her voice was gentle. "Derek, rest. You'll be home when you wake up." By the time I realized something was wrong, my vision had already gone black and I lost consciousness. When I woke up, I found myself in an unfamiliar room. My limbs were tied to the bed with straps. I struggled to move, but felt weak and powerless, like my strength had been completely drained. Clenching my teeth, I yelled, "Emily." She came running in, wearing an apron with flour still on her hands. "Honey, you're awake." I stared at her in shock. "You drugged my water. Are you insane? Let me go." Emily calmly wiped her hands with a couple of wet wipes, then walked over and gently stroked my face. "Honey, I know the divorce upset you, but I can't lose you." She leaned down, resting her head on my chest, her voice filled with longing. "It's just the two of us here. No one can disturb us. Honey, the employees you've trained are incredibly capable. I trust them to handle the company. Stay here with me for a while, and you'll fall in love with me again." I was too stunned to speak. I couldn't believe Emily had reached such a deranged state. Emily smiled contentedly, then brought in a plate of dumplings from outside. With a gentle gesture, she offered one to me. I turned my face away. "After all these years, you still don't know my preferences." "I don't like dumplings." "And for someone who's run the company for so long, you've made no progress at all. Employees who gain power that doesn't rightfully belong to them will inevitably grow corrupt." Emily pretended not to hear a word I said. She dumped the entire plate of dumplings into the trash can and walked out with a steady composure. "If you don't like this, I'll make something else for you." Her trembling voice betrayed her. She wasn't as calm as she appeared. I was utterly exhausted, feeling like communication with her was impossible. I was confined there for 7 whole days. Every day, Emily cooked different meals, took care of me, and tried to cheer me up, just as I had done for her over the past 10 years. The only difference was that she must have been adding something to the food, because every time I ate, I felt weak and drained, unable to muster the strength to even leave the room. In her free time, Emily would look through our old photos, one by one. "Honey, this one was taken on our first anniversary. Look how young we were back then." In the photo, our heads were leaning together. She was smiling at the camera, and I was smiling at her. Emily gazed at the photo with satisfaction, but I felt nothing but calm detachment. It was clear now, whoever loved more deeply was always the one to suffer. "Honey, this one's from when I had my appendix surgery. I cried so much, but you brought me a bouquet of roses to cheer me up." In the photo, Emily was barefaced, her eyes slightly red, lying in the hospital bed with a bouquet of vibrant red roses in her arms. I felt a moment of disorientation. Had it really been so many years? Emily held the photo, her eyes filled with nostalgia. She leaned gently against me, but all I felt was irritation. My tone was cold. "Emily, these photos just make me hate my past self for being so foolish." Her hand froze midair, still holding the photo. Then she put all the photos away, speaking in a placating tone. "Then we won't look at them anymore. I wasn't good enough to you before, but I'll make it up to you from now on." Tears streamed down her face, filled with grievance. "You were too good to me over the past 10 years. I was too young back then to know how to cherish you. Honey, everyone makes mistakes, right? You have to give me another chance." So, it was my fault for treating her well. Those who are favored always take it for granted. Too tired to argue, my head felt heavy, and I wanted to sleep again. Seeing this, Emily dared not disturb me further. She found a light blanket and gently covered me with it. As Emily curled up beside me to sleep, her phone rang. "Emily, we need you to come back immediately. Our company's finances were being audited." Emily, with an air of nonchalance, rested her head on my arm. "Let them audit," she said casually. "There's nothing wrong with our taxes." On the other end of the phone, her assistant sounded on the verge of tears. "That's not it, Emily. The taxes were fine before. But ever since Nathan took over the finances, things haven't been adding up. Now we've been flagged for tax evasion involving a massive amount. Please come back quickly." Emily immediately sat up, her tone filled with shock. "What?" I watched coldly as she left the room with her phone still in hand. She returned shortly after, carrying a small suitcase. "It's fine, Derek. If the company goes bankrupt, so be it. I still have some savings. I'll take you abroad to settle down." I let out a sarcastic laugh. "Emily, you've truly lost it. Not only did you ignore my advice and let Nathan join the company, but now you're thinking of fleeing to evade responsibility." Her assistant had just told her that overnight, Nathan had already fled with the money. He even used their family home as collateral for a loan, presenting both a marriage certificate and the property deed. Emily covered her face and began sobbing uncontrollably, her voice filled with regret. "I was wrong. I made a terrible mistake." Suddenly, the front door burst open. Grace stormed in with a group of police officers. Seeing me lying safely on the bed, she exhaled in relief. "Finally, we've found you." The officers poured into the room and arrested Emily, who was sitting on the floor in utter despair. Not only was she charged with drugging and illegally detaining me, but she also had to compensate for the large sum Nathan had embezzled. Grace hurried over, untying my restraints. Her eyes were red, and her usual aloof demeanor had softened, making her look endearingly vulnerable. "You scare me to death. I couldn't reach you no matter what. I thought." I struggled to lift my arm and gently patted her head. "Silly girl." 1 year later, Emily was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Before she went in, she called me. "Derek, I can't let go of the 10 years we spent together. Now I'll have to spend the next 10 years remembering them." That day happened to be the launch of my new company. After the ribbon-cutting ceremony, the employees gathered to toast. Feeling elated, I drank glass after glass. When I was slightly tipsy, Grace snatched the glass from my hand. "Enough. Your stomach's only been better for a few days, and now you want to end up in the hospital again." Though her tone was scolding, she handed me a warm cup of honey water. I quickly tried to placate her. "All right, no more. I won't drink anymore." Nearby, a shareholder teased, "Looks like Derek's already under his wife's thumb." Grace's face immediately turned red. "We're just dating," she mumbled. Behind me, Lucas gave me a nudge, his gaze sharp. Taking a deep breath, I pulled a ring from my pocket, dropped to one knee, and, amidst the cheers and laughter, asked with all the sincerity I could muster, "Grace, will you marry me?"